The question, well, then what is the role of the human being? In this new economy, humans will be valued for their ability to coordinate with others, collaborate with others, to pursue common purpose, to solve common challenges. In short, to work together in teams to solve real complex problems. And if you compare the people in the workplace that are most productive, most successful, are achieving at the highest levels, they tend to be people who are really good at coordinating and collaborating with others. It's more of this ability to work with others to do really hard things. The pace of this new technology is different from any other. The potential impact is deeper than any other that we've had in the past. We're already starting to see it. I'm worried that the shift is going to be too fast for education to catch up. It's not insurmountable, but we need to move really fast. The value will be placed on your ability to mobilize others around a common purpose.
Today's guest is Dan Gonzalez, an educator, engineer, and entrepreneur whose career is focused on preparing learners for the future of work. Dan studied engineering at Dartmouth College before becoming a high school physics teacher, an experience that shaped his understanding of how students learn and collaborate. He later joined Manhattan Prep, eventually becoming its president after the company's acquisition by Kaplan, and he served on Kaplan Test Prep's leadership team. Today, Dan is the CEO and co-founder of District C, an organization responding to the changing nature of work. District C focuses on developing the uniquely human skills students need: problem-solving, collaboration, and team-based innovation to prepare them for real-world complexity. This mission sits at the center of Dan's work and the conversation we're about to have. We hope you enjoy this conversation with Dan Gonzalez. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. We are looking forward to the conversation. Why don't we start off by having you tell us a bit about District C and your goal for Teamship?
Yeah. So I think of District C as, first of all, thank you both for having me. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. Grateful for the work that you do. I think of District C as an AI company, but we are not on the technical side of that. We're on the human side of that. And I want to explain what I mean by that. And I typically like to explain this using a basketball metaphor. So if you'll bear with me, I don't know if you all are basketball fans. I watch a lot of basketball. And if you watch basketball today, and then you watch a recording of a basketball game from, say, 40 years ago, it's an entirely different experience. So back in the 80s, in the NBA, the average team attempted 2 3-point shots per game. Today, it's about 40 3-point shots per game. So the game has changed dramatically over the last 40 years or so. And of course, if you're preparing young people for this new style of play, you've got to prepare them differently. It doesn't matter if you're a tall player, short player, guard, center, you're preparing for an entirely new game. The game has changed. If you put a pin in that for 1 second, I read a really alarming statistic recently from the Hult International School of Business, and they surveyed a bunch of employers. And they found 89% of employers surveyed try to avoid hiring recent college graduates. And the reason is they deem them unprepared for the workplace. And so I think as educators in the education community, we need to be asking ourselves, why is this happening? I would contend it's because the game has changed. And yet our traditional education system, if you want to call it that, continues to prepare 2-point players for what has become a 3-point economy. And so what do I mean by 3-point economy? I mean an economy that has a labor market that is being actively upended by artificial intelligence and robots, AIs, computers, automation, increasingly taking the rote procedural work that humans used to do. And it's leaving us with the question, well, then what is the role of the human being? And I would say, gosh, in this new economy, humans will be valued for their ability to coordinate with others, collaborate with others, to pursue common purpose, to solve common challenges. In short, to work together in teams to solve real complex problems. And so if that is the human job description of the modern economy, we should be asking ourselves, how do we give students experiences to get them prepared for that job description? And so that's what we do at District C. And we do that through a program that we built that's called Teamship. And you can think of Teamship as a reimagined team-based internship where teams of students solve real problems for real businesses in the community. And all the while, they're developing those 3-point skills that they need for the modern economy: how to leverage the skills of others, how to work in teams, how to break down complex problems, how to present in a professional environment, all those human skills that will help them succeed in a labor market that's been upended by AI.
Thanks for that. I tried. I'm pretty tall. I don't know if you can tell in the video, but I'm about 6'4", so I wasn't very coordinated. So one of the things I tried to play in junior high that I actually wasn't bad at was basketball, and I wasn't a great dribbler, probably because I lacked the coordination. But I was pretty good at rebounds. I was
Hmm.
taller than most of the kids, but I think the basketball thing, and I haven't studied it in great detail, but when you talked about the 2 points to the 3 points. One of the things that hit me, I saw something where like, Steph Curry, right? He's a great 3-point shooter, but all the players would kind of like essentially they draw like a box around him, right? Like they protect his ability to shoot those three, so many 3-point shots. And that's an example of, the evolving game. That's an example of teamwork, right? That's an example of, well, we all win when, somebody excels. So I don't know how much of that strategy. It just really kind of stood out to me, but it was an example of kind of things changing. With your background, I started my career as a computer science teacher, and some of that's come back around to what we talk about. I see you taught high school physics. You help with the Manhattan test prep and Kaplan, and I'm just kind of wondering how all these things shaped what you've built now. Like, did you see inklings of this, even years ago, right? When you were working in these other jobs, did you see kind of this trajectory, even before kind of AI became so disruptive?
Yeah, great question, Stefan. I wonder if you all see this in your work too, that I imagine you have colleagues, some of whom who are really successful in their work, others of whom maybe not as much. And if you compare the people in the workplace that are most productive, um, most successful, are achieving at the highest levels, they tend to be people who are really good at coordinating and collaborating with others to solve really hard problems. And I think oftentimes it's domain agnostic. It's not specific to any specific skill set or background or something that they've studied. It's more of this ability to work with others to do really hard things. And I think that is my co-founder and we started District C back in 2017. My wife and I started it together. And when we were kind of designing the concept, I think that's what we were kind of building the idea off of, was this notion that, wow, the really successful people are really good at teaming and breaking down complex problems. So how do we create an environment and experience where students can do that in a safe way? They can take risks, even if they're not comfortable. A lot of students who engage in teamship have never done anything like this before. So what we try to do is say, yes, the content that you're learning in school matters. The technical skills that you're learning really matter, especially in this high-tech environment. But just as important will be your ability to coordinate with others, to team up with others to do really hard things. And I think that's where we're lacking in traditional educations. We just don't provide enough of those experiences. And so I think we kind of realized that as we got more experience in the professional workplace.
I think what really is appealing to me about this approach, and something that I think we've talked about in other episodes, is a lot of these skills aren't new. These are skills that we've always said as educators that we wanted to teach, that we wanted our students to have, that we've always valued in some ways. But maybe we've kind of drifted from that in terms of traditional education, where we don't allow for that kind of collaboration. And I think about my kids' experiences, big age range from going through high school. There seems to be less time for that occurring now, in terms of kind of the collaboration, team projects. They're focused more on individual efforts, and really a lot of test preparation, AP classes. And so maybe part of it is that we've drifted from it. And so I would love for you to speak to that, but Also, to think about kind of this point in time when we hear reports from the World Economic Forum about millions of jobs being disrupted, by 2030. And your claim is that this is a more important time than ever to be able to return to these human skills. Why is it more critical now? And how much of it is AI? How much of it was even other trends that you saw in education before generative AI made its big splash?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's always been there. My concern now, and I wonder, given your experience in the work you all do every day, what you're seeing, is that the pace of this new technology is different from any other.
Yeah.
The potential impact is deeper than any other that we've had in the past. We're already starting to see it. Talk with a 23-year-old about their job prospects and the number of applications they've sent out and the number they've heard back from and how long they've been trying to get the job that they think they should have. I think we are starting to see the beginning of a pretty major shift in the labor market. I do think, education tends to lag industry, and I think education often takes cues as we should as educators take cues from employers and industry in terms of following, where the job prospects are going to be and what kinds of skills are going to be needed in the job market. But I'm worried that the shift is going to be too fast for education to catch up. It's not insurmountable, but we need to move really fast. I do agree with you, Anand, that like the focus of education tends to be on individual achievement and on content acquisition. I think what we're trying to do with Teamship is show a different model where the focus is on team process and on complex problem solving. Yes, you need to have individual contributors. Yes, you need to understand content in order to solve problems. But I think the challenge for us in education is front staging the team-based problem solving part of it. Too often the content just kind of takes over. And so I think as educators, we are starting to get the message from industry that we need to shift faster, but we need to do it. And we need to move with some urgency on this.
In terms of how fast things are moving, I watch a lot of podcasts and I try to keep up. I watch, I don't know if you're aware of it, the Moonshots podcast with, Peter Diamandis. And, it's really fast. That's like about as fast as you can go. With a little bit of hype put in there, but that's okay. But, even earlier today, I was listening to a podcast, with Fei Fei Li. And, she never hypes anything. And she was like, even though, I'm in this field, I can't keep up with everything, right? Like, so it's like, okay. In the reality, things are changing so fast, but I also always have in the back of my mind, like we know where it's going, right? Like the goal of education can't be to prepare the students every day, like for the newest, micro adaptation of like what the chatbot or some related AI application can do, right? Even by the time they would graduate high school, if they're seniors in high school or university now, that's going to change by the end of the year, let alone kids who are younger, maybe 4 years out. And, we can see a world emerging, of like machine intelligence, right? And, it's jagged, right? All these things, all the limitations of it, but it's going to be able to do a lot, right? And I think it's a question of, are we going to work with it, right? Or is it going to
Mm.
replace us, right? Like those are kind of some of the ultimate questions. And I think some of these ways of learning, right? It's not just the content. It's like if you become accustomed to a way of learning where you're always kind of learning content, right? And you're trying to achieve like more than somebody else. It's like that's not really going to work because the AI is, always going to kind of have the edge on content. It's most instances, it's going to be able to kind of outdo you in like kind of a traditional task. So to me, it's like how do we work with these, emerging and intelligent machines and, to direct it, to your work, like when the students like have these internships and they go in, say with a company, is this one of the things like they're learning, right? In addition to kind of learning these people, teamwork skills, are they also learning, to work with, AI, even just a kind of a basic level to, some people call it a teammate or a coworker or an intern. There's all these kind of different ways of comparing it. Are they learning some of those skills as well?
I would say most teams of high school students and college students are informally introducing AI as a partner in the teamwork that they're doing. I think where we have a big step to take in the next year or so is how to formally introduce AI as a tool in the toolkit. So we teach students a lot of ways of working tools to help them conduct team meetings in a more optimized way, to hear all voices, to break down complex problems, et cetera. We try to take the abstractions of team-based problem solving down to the level of actionable behaviors and ways of working. What we have not yet done is formally introduce AI as a tool alongside all of the others. And I think it's time that we do that because I think, Stefan, you're describing a workplace. People are already doing it. I think right now, if I just like speak for myself, I don't know that I'm formally using AI. I just kind of use it where I can, where I think it makes sense. And sometimes I think, I don't really know what I'm doing. Other times, like, oh, wow, I stumbled upon something here. I think that's what students are doing in school and in their teamship work. I think what we can do is do better at defining some very specific use cases, helping students practice, helping them see early successes so that when they get to the workplace, they're coming AI equipped. I think all the evidence suggests employers are looking for graduates who have those kinds of skills. So, and of course, this is the work that both of you are doing every day. So, I'm excited to kind of take that next step in the work.
So tell us a little bit about when you're working with a teamship model with a group of students. You have this diverse group of students. They're given a problem as outlined by a business. How do they tackle that? Because you have some really impressive statistics in terms of the success rate and how they're able to work through it. I think most would view it as, are the students really capable of tackling such difficult problems? How do you work through that, and how do you support that process?
Yeah. So back when we started this in 2017, we spent the whole first year watching teams of students try to solve problems, real problems for real businesses. And what we learned, I think our big kind of startup insight in that first year was, wow, students really appreciate this opportunity and they value this as something different from what they've typically done in school. But through our observations, we determined students don't really get better at that work if left to their own devices. They need really proactive, engaged coaching. And so what we did the second year is we started to like throw out some coaching moves during the team. So we were kind of actively observing. We would like wait 5 or 10 minutes, kind of get a gauge on the conversation, and then we'd interject for a minute or two with a coaching move, as we would call it. And some of them fell flat. We threw those out. Others we saw would really move the needle and change the way that they were working. And so we would keep those. And we started to collect those in kind of a proverbial basket. And after a while, we felt like, oh wow, if we piece these together in a certain sequence, we've got a coaching philosophy that we can tie to this work. So we created the District C coaching philosophy, and then a coaching institute through which we train educators in this philosophy. And I think what is core to this model is the coaching. That I think, putting students in teams and asking them to do something is the easy part. The hard part is helping them get better at the work. And that is our job as educators. And so that coaching takes a lot of different forms, but at its essence, it is looking for certain things in the student work, and it's coaching students on tools, behaviors, and ways of working to help them with their process. So the coaching is not really designed to help students arrive at the answers to the problems or to even help them define insights into those problems. It's to help them work better as a team using tools and ways of working to optimize their team performance. And I think for an educator, that shift is pretty dramatic. I was a teacher. Educators often think of their work as consisting of my job is to tell you the things that I know. This is about helping students develop the processes they need to be great teammates and to be a great team in the face of really challenging environments and contexts. So that coaching is really at the heart of the experience for both the adult and the students.
Yeah, that's great. I've taught small group communication for a number of years, and I don't think we have given the students the opportunity to develop to the level that you're talking about, but even just seeing at a surface level, that kind of coaching, direction, support for students in a group to be able to work together is really promising, and there's a lot of potential. I'm excited to learn more and to be able to see examples of what you've been able to do with students. That's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, a couple takeoffs from that. As Anna knows, I spent most of my career actually in schools, K-12 and university, as a debate coach, right? And I've taught some argumentation classes. I've been teaching some AI classes, public speaking, but 90% of what I've done is coaching, right? And you kind of originally, I think we just kind of borrowed the sports comparison, but it is different, right? You're helping students develop their strengths, their weaknesses. You see them perform, you help them adjust, right, their performance, like you motivate them. And even once all this stuff kind of started happening with generative AI, and I thought, okay, well, the AI can help students learn and all these kind of things. What we really need is kind of move to a more of a coaching model
Hmm.
education, and it's different than what people have. But teachers think, oh, well, they want to replace us. It's like, well, no, maybe some of us have some ideas about changing your role, right? But it's it's more coaching. And but I also see that it doesn't work with every student, but it tends to motivate the students. In debate, I mean, you obviously have a lot of control over your arguments and your development, and all these types of things. And the one of the things I saw, it was like, what is it, 81%, right, of your business partners have implemented some of the solutions that were proposed by your students, right? So it's also, I'm thinking when I saw that, it's like, oh yeah, I've heard kids in internship programs, they go to some office once a week, and they get coffee, but there's some value, there is still some value to that. They saw what a work environment was like. They learned about an industry or whatever, but you're doing so much more, right, in terms of coaching the students and to the point where their ideas are contributing, which in a way shouldn't surprise us, right? Like a lot of these kids have great ideas, and they're really more attuned to kind of AI in some ways and what's going on in the world than us older folks. So I just kind of wonder if you could just talk about, like, or maybe an example of something like they implemented, how the students kind of react when they do see one of their ideas used in the business.
Yeah, I I love this question. And I'll give you a brief example of a real engagement. But one of the things I think a lot about is this shift, again, going back to traditional school versus what, we might say we need these days. I think a lot of traditional school trains students in what I would call like a completion mindset. My job is to get done with the chapter, get done with this exam, get done with this grade level. And all of those things are in service of like moving on to the next thing. Even the word graduation in of itself is like put all of this stuff in the rearview mirror and get on with the next thing. And that completion mindset, I think, obviously there's a place for it. I'd be the first to say like getting done with stuff is often a good thing in the workplace, but I think it can also train students um, to come out lacking a real sense for, what is valued in the workplace, which is how much value can you contribute to a client, to a teammate, to a customer, whatever it might be. So trying to help students transition from a completion mindset to a contribution mindset. And I think the best way to do that is give them real opportunities to contribute. And that's what we hope to do in Teamship is we're bringing real businesses with real problems. They're not hypothetical. They're not made up. These professionals are coming with a struggle that they're having, and they haven't figured out how to address it. And they're relying on teams of students to give them perspectives that they might not have. And that gives students the opportunity to sit at a table with real professionals and say, wow, my voice matters. I can really contribute. It's not just about getting done with this thing. It's about contributing real value. And I think we need more of that in education. I'll give you a quick example. So we had a team of students recently work with a film studio. And the associate producer of that film studio came to the team and she said, look, we're trying to find ways to get more efficient with our production process when we're making a film. Um, and we're like, we'd like to use technology and perhaps AI, but we don't want to, diminish like the human, like creative potential in that process, right? Which I think a lot of artists are probably thinking about, and a lot of us in other lines of work are thinking about. So the students asked a bunch of questions, they interviewed stakeholders, they did a bunch of research, and this is over, roughly 30 hours of work. And they pinpointed in the production process the piece of the work associated with transcribing the audio content. And they noticed that the tools that the studio was using were leading to a bunch of errors. I think they had tried ChatGPT and it was leading to inconsistent outputs. And so the team went off and they researched a bunch of different potential solutions. And they came up with this tool that they found, a third-party provider called Descript AI, which is a transcription service. And they did a kind of a cost-benefit analysis. They laid out all the pricing. They did some testing, and they presented it to this producer, and as a viable solution for the film studio to adopt. And her response was, I'm going to quote this, "I am mesmerized by your process." And I love that because, yes, a lot of times businesses are using solutions or parts of them or ideas from the student work, but I love that she narrowed in on their process.
Yeah.
And that's really key to what we're helping students develop is what is your process? What is the optimal process for this work? And how do you use that process to deliver real value to real people in the world? And once they have that experience, it's totally eye-opening for them. And the feedback that we get from students most often is, I love the fact that as a teenager, my voice mattered. And I got to do something with my peers that really mattered. And that's what this is all about. We want to train them to be contributors. We want to help them see the potential that they have so that they can go from that completion mindset to a contribution mindset.
We hear this from students all the time that they want to see that they're doing something that is applied, that's
Yeah.
practical, that they get a payoff for their work. And I can only imagine how those students felt when they were told that somebody was mesmerized by their process. That's fantastic. I love that story. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Now, as I understand it, within the program, there are some really practical tools and some skill sets that are developed. Could you tell us about one or two of them? And I'm also curious about if you had advice for other instructors, maybe somebody that is in a traditional setting, how could they incorporate maybe one or two of these tools or some of this perspective? They might not have the same, latitude or freedom to be able to go as far as you're able to go, but to be able to help set the foundation, what can they do?
Yeah. So yeah, we have a set of tools that we coach students on, and the key to these tools is that they are really, really simple. Even to the point where when you hear them, you'll be like, "That's the tool," and I'm going to tell you, yes. The key to leveraging the tools is snapping them together and sequencing them and stacking them in a way that leads to optimal team performance. So I'm going to give you an example of three tools, and we call these. I don't want to beat the basketball metaphor, but we call these the dribble, pass, shoot tools of Teamship. And when I explain them, any educator listening to this will be able to take these and use them as they are coaching students through any group work or group project that their students might be working on. So if you were to walk into a Teamship team meeting where a team of four students is working on a problem for a business, often what you will look for as a coach, what I would look for as a coach, is am I hearing a balance of voice? Am I hearing contributions from all of the team members? And am I hearing that in an organized and consistent way? And oftentimes you won't hear that, especially at the beginning of the teamship cycle. And so what we have coached students on is a set of tools that they can sequence to kind of address those issues in their team performance. So the first tool is something called what we call solo flight. And it is what it sounds like. It is solo time to think before the group starts talking. And the reason why this tool has so much power is that oftentimes in a group, you will have half the people who are introverts, half who are extroverts. I'm an introvert. I know that I prefer to have some processing time before I share my thoughts with other members of the group. That makes me most comfortable. So solo flight gives you that time. So imagine you are a team of students. Let's say you've just done an hour of individual research. You're bringing that back to your team and you're about to have a conversation. So what a team might do to optimize their performance and to hear from all voices and perspectives is to sequence three tools. First, solo flight. Let's do a solo flight. Think about what you want to share. We're going to do a 3-minute solo flight. Then what we're going to do is called a take 7. We're going to take 7 minutes for each member of the team, and it's their time. They're going to spend 2 or 3 of those minutes sharing what they found in their research. And then the rest of the time, we're going to use the questioning tool, which is the third tool. The other three members of the team are going to ask questions of that person. You're not allowed to change the topic. You're not allowed to go back to what you discovered in your research. You are focused on, let's say it's you, Anand. I'm going to be asking you questions for 3 to 5 minutes based on your sharing, and we're going to really dive into your thinking. And that's really the point of the tool. So solo flight plus a take 7 plus questioning tool. And after about 20, 25 minutes, you've gone deep with each member of the team, and the individual intelligence that those team members had turns into collective intelligence. So what we do initially in the program is we train students on how to get really good at these tools so that when they're in their team environments, they can use them to optimize that performance.
That's excellent.
Yeah, and I really like too. It's you're because you're kind of making them do each of that part. They're learning a process, right? And then they almost probably, hopefully, in the future, right? That someone doesn't make them go through the process. They don't think, well, first I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, right? It just becomes kind of a natural way of doing things, right? Which
Yeah.
is great. To me, I was thinking, yeah, I'd like that process too, right? And
Yeah.
they're learning it, and kind of like what I was saying earlier. It's like it's like you're learning content in school, but you're learning in a way that, like, okay, this becomes replicable. And maybe it's kind of that replicable way that employers aren't looking for anymore, right? Beyond kind of the content, they're looking for people who kind of learn and work in different ways, like, and in the ways that you're teaching. And we heard a story from some of the students working with an ed tech company. I think it was called Touchbase, where they were kind of developing, some trust and kind of dealing with some non-responsive members, right? And I think, obviously, I'm sure there are instances, right, where they go out and there are some struggles, right, some difficulties, but that's part of what they're learning, right, to overcome these things. I wonder if you could talk about that, or even just another example of maybe something where there were some difficulties, but you helped them work through it, or the process helped them work through it, and how the students grew from that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the authenticity of the experience. And oftentimes, there are times when a business partner will hear the student proposal, ask a few questions, and they'll come back and say, you know what? Like, appreciated the chance to get to work with you. We can't leverage this idea at the moment for these reasons. And part of what we're helping students to um, acclimate to is a real environment where when you are tasked with something and trying to deliver real value, sometimes you might not get all the way there, and that's okay. And that happens in real work. I mean, how many times have we proposed things to supervisors or to a company, and those ideas get shelved, and, never to be seen again? It's part of learning how the world works and how the workplace functions. Um, I would say the most common kind of mid-cycle adjustment that students have is they they think they are on the path to a solution, and they tend to jump to solutions pretty quickly. And this goes back to the completion mindset. If their default is our job is to get done with this thing, they want to get to the solution, right? And what we do is we have intentionally designed inside the cycle, there's a midpoint check-in with the business. So this happens a couple of weeks after the initial interview and a couple of weeks before the final proposal. But it's the student's opportunity to kind of share some initial thinking with the business partner and get some feedback. Oftentimes in that midpoint check-in, the feedback will be, we've tried that. It didn't work. Or you aren't considering these factors that are going to make it impossible for us to do that. So the students are kind of like taken back a little bit on their heels, and they have to reconsider, like, oh my gosh, we just spent 2 or 3 weeks working on this and it's not viable. What do we do? Like, we've not experienced that before. So they have to kind of rethink their process and go back to the drawing board. Those adjustments in real time, though, take like concerted effort and a good amount of persistence and stick-to-itness. And that's all a part of these like self-awareness skills that we want students to get and develop for the workplace.
Well, that resilience is so incredibly important, and having the experience of being knocked back on their heels and knowing they
Yeah.
can move forward again and reapply the process is invaluable. So, yeah, that's great. I was wondering about that myself, and that's a good example of that. I'm wondering about, given the changes and how rapidly things are changing. And I think that when you started this in 2017, you've seen some real changes societally, certainly within the economy. AI is certainly a part of that. And one thing that we've seen is that, and reading about, is that the economic forces are changing more rapidly than they ever were before, and in part because of introduction of AI and different automation processes. If we're worried about that happening so quickly, is there another way to kind of lead that change? If you were to implement another aspect of team building, a problem solving, of another skill set, perhaps. What else do you think you would encourage students at that age to maybe to work on to be ready for upcoming changes? Because it sounds like the program you have now is really well equipped for students that are going to be entering the workforce soon. But I also get the question from my college students, well, what about 2, 3, or 4 years from now? How is it going to change? How do I get ready for that change as well?
Yeah. And this is kind of the thought exercise that all of us are going through, right? Is like,
Yeah.
what does this look like in 3 or 4 years? And God forbid, 10 years from now, what, how is the labor market going to look different than it does today? How is the world going to look different than it does today? Those are big question marks. I do feel, and curious to hear what you all think. I feel pretty confident that the constant will be, uh, the value will be placed on your ability to mobilize others around a common purpose. And regardless of how sophisticated the technology becomes, and whether the work is actually to earn a living or to do something in your community or to do good by your family, we're going to have to decide what is important to us, what we value, and how to continue to improve on those things. And that is all about getting people together to do hard things. And that requires coordination and collaboration, teamwork. Um, and so I feel like that is going to be a constant. And so it feels like a worthwhile endeavor to continue to emphasize those things and the things we're working on with students. Curious what you all think and how you approach that in your work every
Yeah,
day.
I think I'm very much along on the same page that you are with many of these same skill sets. I'm having these same discussions with
Mhm.
colleagues at my institution, thinking about the importance of these durable skills. The collaboration piece is essential, and I'm so impressed with what you've been able to do with that, especially with younger students, to think about how they can build those collaborative skills. I think the other aspect of this, probably two other things that are standing out to me. One would be learning how to learn. We don't do a lot of that in a traditional setting. It's more about completion, instead of thinking about how do you continue to learn on your own to be flexible going forward. Part of it is also those management and leadership skills, but I think within the collaborative mindset, you're helping develop that. I think that last piece is kind of close to what you were just saying about understanding what we value and knowing where we're going to go with something. I would probably push it even a little bit further because I'm thinking about this with current changes when I talk to people in business. It's so many of the students then are prepared to be ready to, if you're their instructor, okay, what's Mr. Gonzalez going to see as the effective outcome?
Mhm.
How is that going to be evaluated by Mr. Bouchard or Anand Rao? How is that going to happen? I think they need to be able to develop those evaluative and judgment skills to the point that if they're going to be directing AI bots or agentic workflows, they know what the outcome should be. So then they can determine whether or not that outcome of those bots and the collaborative work between people and those bots actually gets there. And I think you're cracking this. You're getting to it where they're thinking about here's what the goal is. I think if we can get students to the point where not only are they able to employ that kind of process, they have a clear goal in mind, and then they can serve both as the interns, the workers, and as the supervisor that can figure out, well, this is really where I wanted to go. This is how I can evaluate if that output is good enough, if that really meets the goal, because that'll help prevent them from becoming complacent. Then it's not just
Yeah.
I'll accept whatever the output is. It's no, that's not good enough. I'm going to do this again. And that's really hard. That's hard enough to do, as the example that you were outlined when you present that to a supervisor or a boss. But it's even more challenging when it's yourself trying to tell yourself, no, that's not good enough. I'm going to have to go back and do this again.
Yeah, I love this point. It's almost like how do we help students develop a sense of vision,
Yeah.
um, so that they're kind of defining the end goal. They're seeing an issue and they're defining the end goal. I really love that sentiment. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think we should, almost like kind of have to accelerate like kind of the hands-on or like, the reality of their learning. I almost think kids who, graduate, say today from K-12, they need to, instead of maybe having this diploma that's an endpoint, I mean, you could still have one, but like I think every kid should have created some kind of business, like either with themselves or with others, that at least generated some revenue, right? All businesses don't succeed, like in terms of kind of the long thing, but I think when kids, leave high school, that they need to be ready to be an entrepreneur. Some people say that entrepreneurship is the new job, right? Like,
Mhm.
many people say this, and your program really sets them up for that because I was thinking about it and there's all this emphasis on going to college, and I think college is great. I spend a lot of my time in that environment, but kids are told like, well, if you don't go to college, you're gonna flip hamburgers or you're just gonna work at a cash register. And I'm thinking that's such a strange message to send to students. It's like, hey, come learn with us for 12 years, right, in our school or our district. And after that 12 years, you're gonna be qualified to flip a hamburger.
Mhm.
I think we need to really kind of kind of prepare students for more than that by the time they graduate, right? Not just in general. I think it would be useful. I mean, half of students don't even go to college, right? And
Yeah.
they don't all graduate. But like even now, we're facing this gap where like you could go to college. Dave London, he's like instructor at MIT, and he runs this entrepreneurship program for students at Harvard, MIT, and I think at Northeastern. And he's like, look, if you have a good idea, you might want to just drop out and do it because it might not even be relevant in 4 years. Right?
Yeah.
Like what
Yeah.
you're learning your freshman year of college, especially like in the sciences and the humanities, it's going to be more durable, right? These other skills.
Yeah.
Your product may have no value in 4 years. So I think kids, we shouldn't view college as a place to grow up. If anything, college should, you graduate, you create this business in high school, you play around with it, you get it to generate some revenue, you're learning to develop your interests. You take that to college and okay, like, there's business professors, there's, people who know more about technology that can help you develop that. You can get this humanities education. It seems like college should be about developing some interests that you started when you were younger. But one other question I had is, we talk about it like kind of the curriculum. Okay, there's relevant content kids need to learn. Understand math, biology, science. Maybe the way they're learning is, could be a bit different. It doesn't, kind of reward or encourage all these communication skills. But one thing I look at in schools in K-12, right? It's like, well, we have a lot of sports. Some schools have a lot of like extracurriculars or co-curriculars, depending on how define them, debate, model UN, all these types of things. And leadership, student government, right? Like these kind of extracurriculars do teach, like, sometimes not explicitly, but they at least develop or grow or inculcate these types of skills. So I'm wondering if you find that students who are involved in those areas, when they enter your program, do you see some of that, or do you see some, kind of spillover between the two? Because to me, it seems that those are places where students are developing some of these skills.
Yeah. If I were to state a connection that would be purely anecdotal, I do think it's right. I think that instinct is right. And I think what I would say about it is if you think about a team on a field, an orchestra on a stage, a band on a stage, think about a band on a stage. You've got students playing real instruments on a real stage, playing a real piece with a real conductor in front of a live audience, doing real entertainment. I think a lot of times the most authentic learning experiences we have happen in the after school extracurricular hours, which is it's a little bit odd to think about it that way. But I think you're absolutely right, Stefan, that those skills that you develop through real opportunities. And yeah, the trumpets might be out of tune. The violins might have come in a little bit late. They're not perfect, but they're doing it, right? And it is authentic. It is real. And all the pressure that comes with that. Learning to deal with adversity, learning like to practice for that, learning to work with others. I think it's absolutely right. And I think if you were to, I would guess if we did a study on this and you were to like, you know, track the results of athletes and musicians, et cetera, who have those kinds of experiences, I bet they are better prepared because they've had those authentic experiences. It feels right to me. But
Yeah,
anyway,
that makes a lot of sense. That's
yeah.
excellent. Well, Dan, we've really enjoyed this conversation. Really, certainly enjoyed learning more about the work that you're doing with District C. For anybody that's viewing, if they want to find out more, how can they find out more? Where can they find you? And do you have any last bits of advice for teachers or for parents that are thinking about what's the best path forward?
Yeah, so you can find us at districtc.co. There's no M at the end. It's .co. One of our biggest mistakes in starting the business that we had a lot of lost emails because of that. We should have known that back then. But districtc.co. And I guess one piece of advice is, I guess, balance, encouraging balance. I think a lot of times we're, telling our kids that the most important job you have is to, be good at school and to get the grades that you need to get, et cetera. But I would really encourage adults, teachers, parents to help students seek balance in their lives and to pursue things that are interesting, that might give them those authentic experiences that they'll need to be prepared for their careers and their futures, whether that's teamship or playing on a real team or doing anything else that's in kind of that more authentic realm.
We all need a little more balance. Thanks for
Yeah.
that, Dan. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so
On
much.
and Stefan, thank you so much for having me. Really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Great.
you too.